course. Whoop, 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 whoop. Moving too fast here. Let me get you up on stage. Hello, Sean.
Hello, how are you all? Good evening, I think it is in Europe right now.
Sorry, say again?
It's evening now in Europe, right?
Yeah, for me it's just 11 p.m.
Wow.
But for you, 5 a.m. in the morning. So is it a good morning? Is it a early morning for you or a late evening?
I do tend to try and get up around about 5, but I normally spend an hour getting my brain into gear. But that's okay. I got up half hour earlier.
Oof. I mean, that's
It's
usually the time when I go to bed.
Hey, it's a good practice, you know. I mean, I've always been a believer that I can sleep when I'm dead, and for now, it's get up and be productive for as much as possible. It's a
Hell yeah.
discipline thing.
And also, I mean, in the morning you can just work. You can get so much work in without getting distracted by any
Yeah.
people, and just can do your stuff. And then once people wake up, you already got your 3-4 hours of work in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So usually how it goes here, we just usually wait 1, 2, 3 minutes for people to come in, trickle in here, as they see the announcements. Then I'm doing my intro, and then I'm gonna let you speak to our host, Mr. Mad Hatter here. So yeah, that's how the usual way.
Cool.
So you can still just relax, get your voice a bit warmed up with me.
Yes. I don't normally have such a deep voice.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of AMAs, so I can tell you are still in your morning voice, but at least we get now at least a phonetically different CE, right?
It sounds actually quite cool, this deep. Like, maybe I should do all of my audio in the morning.
Yeah, I also love it in the morning. Just I'm trying to speak as much with my low voice as I can because I just feel so super duper manly. And then after my first coffee, I'm back to sounding like a how I'm supposed to sound. So, but anyways, Mr. Mad Hatter, do you want to get this started?
Yes, sir.
Awesome, awesome. Hello, and thank you all for coming today. Welcome to The Pillars. We are a community-led space aimed at supporting protocols and educating our investors through intelligent and meaningful conversations. Here we ask the tough questions you all want answered. Now let me introduce to you Sean from Fleamint. So Fleamint is an interesting protocol project, I would say, and more like a project. It took me a couple of read-throughs to wrap my head around it. But basically, what it is, it's fairly simple. It's a marketplace, or let me rephrase, it's a super dApp they're going to build. At the heart is the marketplace, and that marketplace is an NFT marketplace. And those aren't just normal NFTs that you would see on OpenSea or the NFT trade, NF trade. These NFTs are tied to how we would say Web2 businesses, real life businesses. What Fleamint is now providing is basically the access of the Web2 businesses to the Web3 space. And that's, of course, not all of it. Also, they have their own DEX, they have their own token, the FLM token. And also, they're going to have you're also going to have your own wallet. So there's going to be a whole ecosystem built around Fleamint. Their whole goal is, their aim is to give people a ease of access to very interesting investing opportunities they might not have had in the real world or even in the crypto world. As you can also see, for the community now, we have a $55 giveaway that is going to be announced at some point during the CEE. And also, the community questions channel is open. Please ask away. I'm going to share the Discord link in there, and I'm also going to share the white paper there so you can read along if you need something. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys. I'm going to jump off the stage now, and yeah, enjoy.
Thanks.
Thank you, David. Sean, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Do I call you Mad Hatter?
Yes, yeah, Mad Hatter's fine. Oi, I also respond to oi every now and again.
That's
So,
actually my pronouns on LinkedIn.
Yeah, oi.
Or you.
So, or you or Mad Hatter is fine for me. Thank you for joining us this early. It's super early for you at the moment, right? Is it 5 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, just gone.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Excited to have this conversation. As David said, it's quite expansive. There's a lot going on. It took a good few run-throughs and listening of AMAs to really wrap my head around what it is that you guys are creating and wanting to achieve. Could you give us a bit of an overview as to what the Fleamint is all about?
Sure.
Bird's eye overview of what it is that you guys are creating.
Well, yeah, and part of the reason why it needs that multiple goes is quite simply because it's so expansive. I think can I, if you don't mind, frame this in the problem that we see in the crypto space, and then the understanding of why we do what we do comes in. So if you think of the whole original discussion in cryptocurrencies was what makes a utility token a utility token? Why is it a currency? Okay, so then you should really look at what a nation state does when it issues a currency. And it has three major pillars, if you pardon the pun, to what makes a currency real. Okay, you've got your the law, the enforcement, that gives it safety and security. You've also got an army that keeps it safe and secure. You've also got population, which is akin to users, which are people who are going to use that currency. And then you've got your economic activity, or GDP. And that's the thing that is missing from most cryptocurrency projects. Most cryptocurrency projects have amazing technology, code is law, that's fine. We understand that. We're all Web3 people here. We understand that the security of smart contracts and the security of the blockchain is pretty solid. You don't need an army to enforce it. We can find users. Users are everywhere. Your community is a bunch of wonderful users who we hope will come into our system and then start adopting the use of our currency. But if you don't have anything to buy, and if you don't have any economic value for that utility, then things kind of fall apart, and it's all about just speculation. And that's why the cryptocurrency market is so incredibly volatile, and that's why so many projects fade away, because they don't focus on profitability and business. Okay, so that's the problem. And then how do we solve this, right? So the solution is twofold. One, current numbers of users in crypto projects is based around hype and this kind of community, and it's fantastic for sure. However, mass adoption is the real key. Only around 6% of the global population has ever even really touched cryptocurrency. That means 94% of people, and to some extent over 80% of the wealth of the world, hasn't really engaged with the cryptocurrency market yet. We are all early, folks. Every single one of us here is very, very early, even though we're 10 years into the crypto journey. Well, I'm 11 years into 12, in 2011 to now. Do the maths, right? So basically, we're on the crypto journey, but we are early steps. That journey is going to be long, and it will be all pervasive, i.e., in the next 10, 15 years, there will be no such thing as anything other than cryptocurrency. Okay, so we are extremely early in the adoption phase. So what is going to attract my mum? I always talk about this, and you may have seen this on other AMAs. My mum's my perfect target market because she squints at the mobile phone and doesn't really know how the phone works. Okay, and she has no interest in ever knowing the technology or the science behind anything in her life. All she wants to do is pick something up, press a button, and make it happen. She doesn't care about the philosophy of decentralization. She doesn't care about an RPC network. She doesn't care about a Chrome extension for a wallet. She doesn't even really particularly care about self-custody, okay? And let's face it, there are two huge benefits to self-custody when it comes to crypto. One is obviously your personal control, which we all as early adopters consider to be extremely important. But the other is also being outside of the traditional finance system, and therefore not having the oversight of the evil bankers, etc. And having been in the traditional finance world, that is one of the drivers for me to be in this space. Okay, so mass adoption is a crucial part of the project's philosophy. Getting a currency that has real utility is a part of that philosophy. So how do we achieve it? Well, you're right to say super dApp earlier, but we try and move away from that phrase, particularly in Europe, because there aren't really many super apps for people to kind of compare to. In Southeast Asia, it's quite common now. There are a few super apps. A super app is somewhere where you can buy your daily shopping, you can pay things online, you can also interact socially. It's everything all in one, okay? And really the closest thing they have in Western nations is probably Uber, and to a smaller extent, Amazon. So, but what we want to do is provide you, let's call it an ecosystem. It makes more sense to people in Europe, okay? So we've got, you can use your own wallet, but we do have a wallet that is on the magic source code. So this is existing, tried and tested technology, wallet technology, which also happens to be KYC'd into the platform. Now, MiCA regulations in Europe mean that wallet-to-wallet transactions should have KYC information in place for some ridiculously small amount of transfer. So this means, although they don't really cover NFTs yet, as they realize that we use NFTs for real world assets, regulation will come for the NFT space as well. Okay. And you can either fight regulation and go completely outlaw Wild West and sort of hide behind decentralization, or you can appreciate the fact that they have all the money and all the power, and you probably need to sit within some hybrid version of regulation. Okay. So we use an existing third-party KYC checker called Persona. They do KYC checks for centralized exchanges all over the world, but we don't hold that KYC information. So we're not able to tell somebody Bob Smith or whoever owns X wallet. But what we do know is that wallet is attached to a code number on the third party. So it's a kind of Web 2.5 version of a zero knowledge proof. Okay. Now that's also attached to the email, and the person signs in, and they'll be able to sign in the future through their mobile phone or whatever, which also has their own level of biometrics if they want. And they can look at the phone and then sign in or press their thumbprint, depending on what kind of phone they have, right? But the point is that it's then easy for people like my mum to get involved with. And one of the big concerns of those, let's face it, slightly older adopters of crypto is what happens if you pass away and you've got crypto assets? How do your family get that in their legacy? Okay, it's a real concern for the boomer generation. So by having the KYC attached to their email, it has to be done legally. It can't be done like by Joe Smith, or it has to be done by the individual if they're still alive. They have to prove the KYC in their email, and they can reset the password. That's all that can be done. Not password, sorry, key phrase. Okay. So say somebody lost their private keys, they would be able to reset those keys. And say somebody passed away, then their legal estate could, via court orders, reset those keys. So that's a really powerful tool for the boomers and the mass adoption type of people to come into the space. But once they're there, what are they going to do? Are they going to then go log into another website with this new wallet that we've given them? Probably not, because they don't like running around from place to place. But if they're in there and they go, wait a minute, I can now invest through the venture arm. I can talk to people in a non-toxic, safe environment. Because let's face it, social media as a whole has a problem insofar as people are anonymous and therefore get away with all sorts of stuff. Okay. And we see it in Web3 where anonymous people, undoxed people, scam people all the time. Okay. So by having that layer, that filter, what you're doing is you're bringing accountability to participation. Okay. So it means that it is extremely unlikely that people will be scamming people on the system, because there is a point of legal contact to them to be able to either kick them out and then never let them back on again, or in the event of anybody doing something in the venture arm, for example, we do KYB, we do asset audits, we do a full check of the businesses coming onto that venture arm. Venture is basically like a grown-up launchpad. And that's probably the most exciting part that we're leading with in the beginning. It means that you're going to get verified businesses coming in, which means, if they don't do what they're saying they're doing, you can sue them because you have a direct individual relationship with them. And in fact, if many people do it, you can sue them in a class action. So it's accountability again. It's bringing accountability, safety, and security, which again attracts all the people who are not in crypto right now to come into crypto and say, well, wait a minute, this is actually a safe place to do this. There's not going to be some monkey face 22 who's going to rip me off from his little basement in God knows where, right? So this is a barrier to entry that we're now removing by adding in the safety and security. And obviously the marketplace itself will include monkey JPEGs and NFTs and all that kind of stuff. But we do have right now over $600 million book value of real estate to sell, various stages within that process. So some is deposits and then move to off-chain. The jurisdictions of the world are not all ready to put every single bit of real estate on chain, right? And it's very important that people are clear with other people when they do this. You see a lot of projects saying we're doing real world asset tokenization. They're not. Okay. What they're doing is they're doing IOUs on chain or something like that. You've got to have the correct contractual, and this is boring legal stuff, excuse me, but
No,
you have
please,
to have
go for it.
you have to have the correct contractual obligations to make it enforceable. If there's no enforceability, I would steer clear of a project. And that's basically it, really, in a nutshell. I say, rambling on. It's everything you need all in one spot.
There is a lot to unpack there.
Go ahead.
So, strong opener. Where to begin? I have a bunch of questions. Let's start with the security aspect. I appreciate that you guys are security focused. I like that. However, the problem with Web3, as we know, and as you've alluded to, is that there are, even though you might try and put measures in place, there are always going to be people out there who are looking to exploit. They're looking for the loopholes. They're looking at the workarounds.
Yes.
What are you guys doing at the moment to ensure that you've always got a team on hand that are plugging any holes? Is there anything that you guys are looking at currently that you see as a potential opportunity for someone to exploit, and you are actively working on stopping it? Because nothing is foolproof, right? So
Sure.
what do you guys do in the background right now that ensures when you are dealing with, and you've already quoted a large number, $600 million worth of book assets that you're giving users access to?
Yeah, that's not even the full number. That's just what we have signed already. There's a hell of a lot more coming. We expect to have way more than $1 billion of assets by January.
Sure. Which makes security even more important, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And if I jump straight in at the deep end and I mention something, and I'd be remiss if we're talking about security that I didn't bring this up. One of the things that you guys have recently been faced with is an issue with one of your team members who may or may not have done something nefarious with another project.
Right. Yes.
How did you deal with it? How transparent are you with your community when those kind of things happen? And if I were to ask a blunt question, is why wasn't that plugged, sooner than only a few days up to your pre-sale?
We didn't have the knowledge, to be honest. So
Right.
we do believe in innocent until proven guilty. Okay. And on code review, nothing that person or any of the people in their team did is apparently flawed. Having said that, out of an abundance of caution, we got new contracts for everything. And that's actually why we're delayed. We would have actually launched at the beginning of the month, end of last month, if everything was lined up correctly. And you're right, because sometimes unfortunately that's not even a security thing that we had to deal with. It was more of a PR thing that we had to deal with, because there is definitely a problem in the Web3 space of sort of guilty before proven innocent, right? And as soon as FUD comes, that's something you have to deal with. And if FUD disrupts, particularly at the launch phase, because let me be very clear on that situation, it doesn't look like the person was guilty of anything other than not very good trading, right?
Right.
And that's still bad, because obviously people have suffered directly consequential economic loss, right? And that is something that we don't want to have associated with our project, okay? And that's why those measures came, and we are actually without that particular role at this time. We were in the process of auditing at that point anyway, but out of an abundance of caution, we pivoted across to some other pre-audited contracts. We then re-audited with the new configurations. But when you're only changing like 3 lines of code, it's much quicker to be able to change the contracts. And this is another part to security, right? You have to understand what that security is around. The biggest point of failure in most of these kinds of projects is human. The code can be reviewed by multiple outside parties, right? And if the code is correct, that's not the problem. The problem is the human error in terms of either rolling it out or mistyping a comma or whatever, right? So that's the attitude to security and also to the appearance of security. It's very, very important to ensure that people feel like they can trust us, right? So that's
Agreed.
why we're
Yes.
doxed. We're doxed. We're individually accountable, so on and so forth.
Right. Great. Yes. And I think, you know, the reason I asked that question is, and I'm sure that there's going to be a ton of people interested already in your space or not yet, but might have heard of you, that would have heard this particular story of this individual, and I won't name him, but would have heard this particular story and would have wanted to understand what it is that you guys were doing. And you know, if you're going to be approaching it from multiple different angles, as well as making sure that the code is completely audited and there are no backdoors, I think people are going to be very interested in hearing that, which is great. It also does bring up, you know, a really interesting point, and it's an issue that anybody that is saying that they're bringing real world assets into Web3 is always going to face. And in the real world, if you talk about Web2, you know, Web3 can be seen as a bit of a dirty smear, right? It's you're moving into Web3, you're using Web3, we don't really like that. And in Web3, it can be used as a bit of a tool to put yourself on a slightly higher pedestal than other projects, because you're in a position to say, well, we're bringing in, you know, real world assets. How are you going to balance these two out? Because as important as it is you speaking to the audience here today, it's equally important who it is that you're selling your project and product to in Web2. So how do you balance that, and how do you form that argument when you are speaking to these real world businesses?
Well, the fantastic thing is actually so far, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but we're 8 for 8 in terms of converting and closing. And also the other important thing is when we approach the Web2 business, we come in as a consultancy. So we actually earn money from that process of explaining how they can come into Web3. And obviously we present them our platform as the ideal option for them to go with. But they could choose to go with another platform, or they could choose to do something completely solo for themselves. But in that respect, it doesn't really matter because the company makes the money, which means we're not putting pressure into the token to take value out of the ecosystem, because that is one of the problems with a lot of crypto projects is people, you get enough vampires sucking the actual value out of the system. Well, then where is it for the actual user, you know? So there's no yachts here, right? There's no private jets flying around. I mean, I'm sure people will appreciate it, but this is a $55 giveaway. This is not a hundreds of $1,000s marketing campaign. Because we're bootstrapped, we understand and fully believe in the fact that the business has to be profitable. And prior to launching the entire platform, we already raised over $500,000 in revenue, actual revenue positive. So Web2 businesses, we're not finding too much of a problem when we're speaking to them. And again, when you're going after the 96% of people who have not got involved with Web3 yet, they've generally got this understanding that Web3 exists. I want to get into it. Don't know what it is. Don't know how I apply it to my business. So I don't think they are inside our bubble of knowing too much about, you know, the dodgy Wild West bits of Web3, right? And when you're being approached by people with an existing business track record, so the pitch in a way is not different to them or to you, because it would be pretty disingenuous if we were pitching them in a different way than we pitch the public. We have to have the single message. That's what's trustworthy. The trustworthy thing is we've all got, I'm 47 going on 48 years old. I'm older than your typical crypto people. I happen to be a geek. I happen to be a technophile. I love crypto. I love decentralization. The CEO is a founder of 2 previous near unicorn businesses. He understands that business world and understands how to pitch people on what he can do for them, right? He's a deal doer. That's what he does, right? He's from the trading floor as well. So if you put all of this together, and I'm sure in here somewhere you'll see in the Meta Robin, he's our marketing manager. He's built his own marketing business previously. So when Web2 businesses are talking to us, they see other like-minded entrepreneurs. They don't see Monkeyface 69 or whatever, right? And when we're talking to you guys, okay, you guys see, I hope, people who are from within the crypto community who are also business people who are bringing real businesses into people. And one thing I want us to try and get away from as well a little bit is real world assets. And I said this, so classic example, I had a pitch, well, not pitch, I was on a panel a week and a bit ago, just before, I think it was just before CoinFest in Bali. And it was to the Global Family Office Summit. Okay, so these are all super rich, not exactly a hedge fund, but a bit less than a hedge fund, but they're still dealing with millions and millions of dollars, right? Quite posh people, right? And they were like, oh, we care about regulation and all this kind of stuff, right? And yes, we do care about regulation, and we're explaining to them. But what I'm explaining to them isn't really different from what I'm explaining to you. It's the same pitch. And one of the things that came up was that all assets are real, even the assets that we have that are on chain. So the actual correct terminology should be on-chain assets, because these assets could be, in a bit of paper, they could be in a PDF of a DocuSign. It's all the same. An NFT is just a contract, but on the blockchain, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the mindset that we need those people to change to understand and embrace crypto. When you talk about NFTs, they just think about, Bored Apes and so on and so forth. But reality is that is just a contract of ownership that is recorded on the blockchain. That means it's immutable. It means it's unforgeable. So there is no better place in the world for a secure depository of all the contracts that exist. So why would all of these companies not move to this? In fact,
why haven't
they are? Well, they will slowly but surely. But all of the mass adoption was around, zombies and apes.
So do you think, and is that one of the obstacles that you're perhaps finding, is that, and we'll refer to them as off-chain assets, anybody with off-chain assets that wants to come into this space and perhaps bring them on-chain, do you think it's a misconception of what the NFT is? Is there, because we're talking about, very smart people most of the time, not always, but most of the time. We're talking about people that have a lot of money that they can throw at problems to get them fixed. Is it just the perception that NFTs are just this artwork, the Bored Apes that you reference, or other pieces of artwork that are just, a bit of nonsense that sell for lots of money?
I think it's that. I think it's FTX. I think FTX did huge damage to the crypto world. I think, and Celsius, you hear about these ponzonomical schemes or these lack of adherence to regulatory requirements. And these things are really important, right? Those people work in a regulated environment. So for them, it's like, look, if I put my banking head on, okay, which I'm loath to do because I do detest the fact that I used to work in banking, okay, and I detest the fact that they make so much money, and I'll get onto that as an example in a bit. But there isn't a need for that particular role anymore, right? And that role should actually migrate into Web3 as a point of philosophical principle, but also as a point of economic efficiency. Okay. Oh, sorry, I nearly went into the rant. I'll hold back.
You can go into the rant. It's your floor.
Well, no, I mean, I want to address the point that you mentioned, though. And you were saying that they have a bad conception of the crypto space. Yeah, there is an extent of that, particularly amongst regulated people, because the argument is always regulation versus unregulation and the bad things that unregulated spaces bring. You can't have an investment fund which is regulated risk its funds going into a platform where it's mixed with a cartel's money, or it's mixed with a hacker's money, or it's mixed with a terrorist's money. I mean, these are just massive, massive no-nos in the financial world. Now, a lot of the scaremongering amongst the decentralization crowd is, they want to regulate your money and then turn off your money because they want it programmed and all this kind of stuff. Countries don't want that to happen. Countries want economic activity. They need liquidity. They need cash flowing from one place to another. What they don't want is untaxed and illegally sourced money. Okay. And, that to some extent you have to agree with. Okay. Maybe you might not agree with taxing, and there are other situations to deal with that. But like in terms of terrorist financing and criminal financing, I'm pretty certain nobody here would be happy if the money that they were involved with sort of bled out into a terrorist organization that killed, innocent people or kids. Nobody would want that. Nobody in their right mind would want that. And sometimes we get caught up in the philosophy of, big country bad, corporations bad, and innocent individual people good. But that's not really the paradigm here. The actual intent behind a lot of the regulation is genuine and heartfelt, and that is to prevent bad actors doing things with money. So yeah, we kind of keep them out of the system.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. And and I think wanting to steer away from criminal activities, and unfortunately, it is what Web3 gets a bad rap for. Is that it's a very good feeder for criminal activity. But I'm sure, as you well know, in the UK, for example, you can set up a limited company, have a small restaurant, and be laundering money through that. as often as you like, right? So, it happens in the real world too. It's a problem
Cash is
that is
the
always
main-
going to be around.
Cash is the biggest source of laundered illegal money anywhere in the world.
Yes, it is. So let's talk about what you're going to give people access to. Let's talk about this $600 million plus book assets that you're giving access to. That's through property developers as well as real estate agents and companies around the world, effectively, that you're going to be giving access to. My understanding is that there's also a Champagne Charlie, for example, which is you're going to be able to fractionally invest in horses, not just the horse itself, but the horse training, where the horse is trained, when the horse runs, etc. Can you talk me through all of that?
Yeah. I mean, we, like I mentioned before, we've got 8 corporate partners, or I think I mentioned. I've said this so many times to so many people. and the first 2 to launch on the venture part of the platform will be Champagne Charlie and Fantasy Dollars. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So venture is kind of, I say this phrase all the time, it's a launch pad, but for grown-ups. And the reason being is it's for existing businesses that have a track record, that have assets, that have been through the audit process, the KYB process. The people are not the people are not undoxed. We know who they are. If they do something wrong, you can sue them. So immediately you're in a more secure point of view. Now, the solution for each of those businesses will be different because each business has its own bespoke requirements. So for Champagne Charlie, the best thing for them is right now, if you want to buy a part of a racehorse in a syndicate, you would be dealing with, I'm not even joking, bits of paper faxed back and forth, kept in a loose leaf binder in some shoddy little office in the middle of nowhere, where that records who owns what, and then a team of bookkeepers will work out the winnings at a race. Oh, it placed third, therefore it made this much money, therefore your share is this much, boom, and ping it back to you. That's extremely inefficient, right? It completely demonstrates the requirement for it to be brought into Web3, where you can say, okay, boom, here we go. There are X number of NFTs that equate to this particular horse. Everybody who holds that NFT, the winnings are paid into a single account. The smart contract distributes based on the shares. Boom. Super simple to us. But to them, they were like, oh my God, this is like fire. They were so amazed by the fact that we could streamline their entire process. So not only, I think, are you going to be able to do, I think one horse already ran in Singapore, actually, obviously during the beta. But
did it win?
It didn't. I think it came 4th. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to win all the time. They run more than one race a year. The point is you're investing in that journey, right? And then you can also breed the horse. I mean, this is, again, we're a long-term project, by the way, just to clarify something here. Team tokens don't vest for 2 years, and they complete vesting in 4 years. Okay? 51% of all our tokens sit in the hands of the public. This is not a pump and dump quick fix project. This is going to grow over decades. This is why long-term involvement in Fleamint is a great idea, right? Now, Champagne Charlie and the projects that we work with are also not designed to be flash in the pans. They're designed to continue growing with the platform as the platform grows. And in fact, we have between 2 and 4 week updates all the way through to December already lined up. More products will be added on, more features will be enabled, so on and so forth. So you've actually got a growing ecosystem as well. You've not got sort of a one-hit wonder or anything like that. The other venture project that we're launching at the beginning is called Fantasy Dollar, and that I'm super excited for. They're an existing business based out of Kenya that does fantasy football. So you know where you pick your team and then you get points in a game and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But at the moment they do it on fiat, and it's not gambling because it's literally each party puts down a stake. Let's say they both put down $10 each, and they could win $18, which means the company makes 2 just for facilitating it. It's not gambling. You're not playing against a house. But it's exactly ripe to put in a peer-to-peer basis. And in order to facilitate that, they want to do it with their own utility token because football is the largest sport in the world. Once you start getting millions of users transacting in their fantasy dollars, I would hope that the fantasy dollar becomes worth more than an actual dollar. So, and certainly with more utility to it. So in order to raise liquidity, that's why they're going through the Web3 process, but also to secure a solid global peer-to-peer jurisdiction agnostic kind of system. So it's really important to consider what the solution is for the individual business. So you mentioned the real estate. Each country that we're in has a different set of real estate laws. So in Indonesia, for example, for foreign investment, I live here, by the way. So, and I have a hotel development company myself, so I know the problems. If you want to come here and buy anything, you've got to set up a company and invest $1 million, million Australian, million Singapore, roughly a billion Indonesian rupiah. So that's quite a large barrier to entry for Joe Public. Now, and it's also a complicated process, takes 3 to 6 months. Then by the time you've done that, you then got to do due diligence on the property. The due diligence will take another 3 to 6 months. And then you actually got the actual purchase process. It could be a year before you actually buy the property. Nobody in this project is going to want to do that. Nobody really wants to go through all that pain in the ass. Okay. But if you could buy a pre-due diligenced property via an NFT, you then cut yourself 3 to 6 months out of the time because it's already had the DD done. And all of that is contained within the metadata, or at least the references to the off-chain documentation. So what you're really doing is purchasing a due diligence pack, but it also is a time accelerator. And for the people in the investment world, that's a super important part of the process, right?
Right.
For people in Thailand, for example, if you want to buy there, we can actually carry out the entire process. Oh, and sorry, just to clarify. So in Indonesia, you'd be doing around 10% of the process on chain, and then you move to off chain to finalize the deal. In Thailand, you can do the entire process on chain until the very last moment when everything has to be paid to a Thai bank account in Thai baht. There are different currency controls and different. I'm not going to bore you with the jurisdictional problems of every single country, right? But suffice to say, we have a team of people that work on all of those things and bespoke the solution for the specific legal environment they're in.
So when it comes to the real estate, and you know, the reason I focus on that is because obviously being able to say that you've got 600 million on book assets is a huge number. So therefore, it's a massive selling point for you guys. So a lot of people are going to focus their attention on that. Is this fractionalized ownership of a house, or are we talking about people being able to buy the whole house and everything, including the deed, is all of that data is included in these NFTs?
No, you would go through the transaction process as far as you can in that jurisdiction. So, for example, at the moment, there isn't any digitized deeds. So you can't go to the point of deed transfer on chain. You have to do X amount of the transaction on chain and then finalize the last parts in the real world. Like, as I was saying, even here in Indonesia, you have to do a face-to-face, even if it's a video. You cannot do the transaction remotely. You can.
I mean, as I would expect with any kind of house purchase. What I mean is, and perhaps I'll clarify, are we buying whole houses, or are you able to invest in part of an expensive house?
At the moment, it's whole houses. Okay, but it doesn't mean to say that you can't break that down in between multiple buyers, right? Because like what Web3 gives you the capability to do is all fund a single wallet. So if you were to gain a community, for example, and you guys saw a property you wanted, through the social part of the platform, you could aggregate 10, 20, 30, 40 people, whatever, and you say, hey, okay, we want to buy this particular property, and then you choose to buy it as multiples. That's coming in version, I can't tell you the number. I'm giving you a bit of alpha here as well. I don't think we're supposed to.
Keep going. Keep going with the alpha.
I don't think we're supposed to reveal that yet, actually.
No one's listening. Go for it. Tell me.
So, okay, you want to know about fractional real estate, because everybody loves to find out about fractional real estate. So the original solution we came up with for that is the fact that fractional real estate does fall into the security regs, okay? And even though we're KYC, we don't want it to have to be accredited investors, okay? If you make it so that it's just accredited investors, what you're doing is disenfranchising all those people who want to build themselves passive income for the future. I have a fundamental problem with that. You people all in this room are just as smart as somebody who already locked themselves amongst a $2 or $3 million savings, okay? Or who has 300K disposable income a year. You don't need to have 300,000K disposable income a year to prove that you're intelligent enough to make a financial decision. So I fundamentally detest the whole principle that you need to be an accredited investor. I understand the idea behind it, but I don't like it. To democratize finance, to give people an opportunity to be able to get involved, why should a farmer in Kenya not be able to put $10 into $1 million property and get the safety and security that that large-scale property also gives to their investment? I think they should. I don't think anybody here would be against that, right? And why, indeed, I'm another believer in this phrase, a lot of a little is a lot. Okay, so then this is going to take you back to my unfortunate traditional finance days, okay? And give you a real-world example for a UK-based company that we're consulting for. Today, if they want to develop a property they have to pay between 15 and 18% on their tertiary commercial finance terms. So what happens is they buy a bit of land. They may have some property that already exists on there. It has to be renovated to turn it into flats or houses, whatever it needs to become. Once they purchase it, they then have to finance that build. Now, the financing of the build phase is notoriously expensive. As I just said, they're paying between 15 and 18%. But the banks that lend them that money are taking our Joe Public's savings and lending it to them. But they pay us between 3 and 4%. That 11 to 14% margin the bank makes is, in my opinion, immoral and unnecessary in 2023. Now, if that corporation could directly come to you and say, hey, everybody, let's crowdsource this loan, and I'm going to pay you guys 10%. Now, it's not an insane return crypto thing, but let's face it, most insane crypto returns are unsustainable. As you have seen, any of you that have been involved in DeFi, you will have seen insane returns don't last, okay? That's why, for example, we're doing an 888% APY staking project, but it comes from our reward pool, and when the reward pool is empty, there's no more of it, okay? Simple as that. So it lasts for 150 days, and it's limited in its scope. Then people can cascade into a 500%, people can cascade into a 250%. But that staking product only exists to stabilize and maintain TVL for a maximum of 150 days. At the end of that, the business is self-sustaining. So we are not looking to offer crazy APYs everywhere, left, right, and center. It's like a promo for the beginning of the project. Okay. Anyway, I was digressing. So it's unfair that the bank is earning so much money out of your money. Why don't you earn some of that money? So if the corporate is willing to deal with you directly through the power of Web3 and peer-to-peer, let's not call it borrowing or lending because the terminology comes into the scope of regulations, but let's call it reward sharing. Yeah, and wording is so important when it comes to these things, right? So you call it reward sharing, you purchase an NFT, which is tantamount to somebody receiving $2,000 or $5,000, and you get a fixed reward of 10% a year until they then give you the $2,000 back. Now, you might consider that feels like it's a personal loan, but it isn't because that's not the way it's worded. So what that company's done is save 5% on their outgoings, between 5 and 8% on their outgoings. Now, then think about this. Sorry, get into rant territory. Now think about this. Inflation's a problem all over the world, right? And inflation's a problem because central banks are continually printing money. Now, actually, isn't inflation also a problem because the cost of borrowing that money is really high? And that's why they have to, wait a minute, they raise rates to reduce their supply? This is not a great system. Okay, the traditional finance system doesn't work very well because the reason why the cost of things is going up is not just because there is an excess supply of cash. That's the lie they tell you. Part of the reason why things go up is because the cost of borrowing is high. If the company could save money on the cost of its borrowing, it wouldn't need to charge as much to the public in order to gain its profit.
Sure.
Does that you get that?
And
so
let me just jump in. And I understand what you're saying. And for anybody interesting, by the way, it will be, and all of these partners are available to be looked at on the Fleamint website. I assume you're talking about Hadrian Real Estates, right? Hadrian PLC.
Yeah. That one is Hadrian's.
Yeah.
And it is a public limited company in the UK.
You know, I understand your perspective on banks. It feels a little altruistic, and therefore I would ask how much of what you're earning through perhaps the consultancy that you're doing for these companies, how much of the savings that these companies make are they going to pledge to give back to the investors in order to really show that in actual fact what they wanted to do is put the money back into the hands of the everyday people, and have a lot of a little.
So yeah, exactly. On that particular deal, for example, what we're touting is around about a 10% return a year, which is more than adequate, I think, for everybody to feel like there is a win-win in the situation. Right. They're saving like 8%. But it is different from company to company. Like there is no one size fits all. We do have to discuss these things with each of those individual businesses. So for example, for some of them, they're offering a revenue share rather than a reward. Okay, it literally is a bespoke process. It's why it's really important to engage in the platform, engage in the socials, be an FLMC holder, By the way, you mentioned FLM earlier. That's the old name, but there is apparently some DeFi project called Flamingo with that ticker. So we switched it up to FLMC so that people can quite clearly see who we are, and that's FLM currency. So yeah, look, there isn't a single blanket solution for all of these Web2 businesses, and that's also an important thing for them to understand. Web2 businesses look at this and go, well, I'm not going to do pictures of a monkey, or I don't want to issue a currency. Some of them do want to issue a currency. And
you know, bearing in mind that you have all of these differences between all of these companies, how are you going to host the communication then between investors and these large or small companies that might be looking for their startup cash? Where is that information going to be visible? Is it going to be on your DApp? Will it be in the Discord? Are you going to host weekly, monthly conversations in which you give this data? Where can they find all of that?
Okay, fantastic question. The entire platform is being already built, but not going to launch with it, with a social element built in. Now, I alluded to the fact that the project is KYC'd for everybody that comes on board, but your data is hidden, so you can only use Mad Hatter the Pillars, for example, as your username. You wouldn't be able to write in John Smith or whatever, right? So then let's say you're having a conversation, you've gone into the venture arm and you've engaged with certain aspects, or you've registered an interest in certain genres of business, let's call it. Let's say that you're buying certain things on the marketplace. All of those things would like append, let's say, and I don't want to get geeky about this, but it would append a sort of group trait to your account and then give you access to different chat boxes. Those chat boxes are pretty much similar to Discord channels, or if you're really old like me, you may recall a thing called MARC, Merc. Anybody old enough to remember Merc?
Yes.
So Merc is the forebearer of not only Discord, but also the forebearer of Ventrilo and the forebearer of any chat app that any of you have ever used. All of that existed in C++ in the form of MIRC, which was Internet Relay Chat. It basically is the same system. It automatically creates channels. It automatically puts people in little boxes. And by being able to get those individual group segmentations, what you're going to do is find like-minded investors, and then the businesses are going to find the people who like their particular products, and they're going to be able to feedback. They're going to be able to run direct engagement. They're going to be able to get better win-win outcomes and improve their product. So it's like a massive win. And there's a whole marketing side to this, which unfortunately, look, people look at marketing as being an evil thing, right? But the reality is good data makes good products. And the people who are trying to sell you crap will sell you less crap if they know what you really want. So marketing is not a bad thing, right? And so businesses do want that engaged, evangelized user who is actually either benefiting from their product offerings. And this is even outside of venture. I'm talking more even towards the marketplace here, right? So you might have a designer brand selling goods to you. Let's not use names here, but like designer brand comes in, starts selling you stuff, and it finds out that a certain type of its shoes are really particularly popular, but people wanted X thing on the shoe or X color version of the shoe. They could go and do that because they're getting that real-time feedback from people who are actually engaging within that community on the platform. So yeah, the whole social element sort of ignites all of that feedback back and forth.
In terms of an evangelized community, you want them engaged, energized. Are they going to be able to have any kind of say in decision making in some of these companies that you onboard? Now, I'm sure you're going to tell me, yes, they can give you suggestions and you'll look into them. But I mean, when it comes down to the finer details of actually bringing a company on, is there going to be a voting system? Is there going to be some kind of way that the community itself can vet what's happening? And if they put, maybe it might be a moral reason. They might not necessarily like stories that sit behind the CEO, whatever the reason might be. Will they have the opportunity to say, actually, no, we don't like the look of this company, albeit on paper, it's something that will work really well here. We don't want you to bring these guys on. Is that something you'll listen to?
It's very hard for me to say yes or no directly to that because there is actually a plan. So the companies that get nobody has to invest in anything. Okay. So companies will be put forward if they've paid for the opportunity to be put forward. Okay. We would have our own internal selection process for that, and we do a KYB process to ensure that there are valid investment opportunities for people. That is part of what we do. We don't look at the morality of it. Having said that, I can't see us having a tobacco company, or we definitely wouldn't have, for example, conflict diamonds on the project because we're actually looking at authenticating non-conflict source diamonds. Okay, but there will of course be people's various moral kind of foibles at a time that might want them not to invest in a certain thing. Okay, they don't have to. Okay, just being part of the platform doesn't mean that you're going to be funding something you don't like. It's completely up to you. Having said that, though, for startups, we are looking at rolling out, and this is again just for startups, people who wouldn't qualify for our KYB checks. They would have potentially an opportunity to pitch to the community to be voted onto the platform by a community. So that would, but that's way down in the roadmap. That's not going to even be this year, right?
Okay.
So that's why I don't want to talk too much about that. But
I'm glad you mentioned precious stones, because I know you're under NDA with a particular company. You can't talk about it, but if anybody's reading between the lines, it's a large company that produces some kind of precious metal or stone. Where those often sit behind some kind of moral compass, especially
ethical sourcing is crucial for that, and that's something
right.
we support morally ourselves. But we are not the arbiters of morality for the world. Okay,
Right.
We have our own thoughts. We will engage within them, and the public has obviously got a right to all the information they require to choose whether they want to be involved or not.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm going to circle back to something you said about bootstrapping as well. What was?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing this whole thing has been bootstrapped. Who's bootstrapped it? Where did the money come from, and where is it going? Essentially, obviously the website, the DEX, and we'll get into the DEX, why it's a DEX, not an over-the-counter system, how people can participate in staking through your token, the FLMC token, for example. But how much did all of this cost you so far? And one of the other secondary questions to that I'm going to ask is, you guys have been building now for some time. I've listened to plenty of your AMAs. I went back as far as 6 to 8 months to listen to you guys talk and introduce yourselves. But I haven't heard of you. I haven't heard of you until very recently. And I was surprised by that, if I'm going to be honest. Why haven't I heard of you up until this point? And how do you plan to change that?
Yeah, sure. The marketing costs a lot of money, and effective marketing is also even more important, because people in crypto quite often get VC money, which we don't touch, and then they basically splurge it on stupid, in our opinion, stupid marketing events. And you can have a lot of name. You can have a lot of name exposure, which it does have value, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can get a huge amount of name exposure and then have no final product. And if you see celebrities endorsing something, to me, that's a massive red flag. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if a project is overhyping itself, it's probably just hype. And if a project actually does build it and they shall come. Have you ever seen that Kevin Costner movie, Field of Dreams, where he builds a baseball thing in the middle of a field and then it becomes famous?
Build it and they will come,
That's the idea behind it, right? And the thing is, like an argument I had with our former, but now potentially what's the word, disparaged colleague. He would always say, "Why would people buy stuff in an NFT format when they could buy it in a real format?" And I was like, because everybody will be buying everything in NFT format, and there's no reason not to. It's not going to cost any more money to do it, except for the fact you now have a digitally authenticated contract, and you now have a digitally authenticated whatever the item is, and you can mirror that into the metaverse, which is again a roadmap down the line thing coming. I don't want to go into it too much, but suffice to say, when this project started, I was actually myself in Unreal 5 creating metaverse versions of them all, and there are some legal ramifications as to why we want to do a metaverse as well. But that's down the line, right? Because if you elevate products into a metaverse, who is actually the jurisdiction in that metaverse?
Well, you tell me.
Well, I'm asking you the question. Who is going to govern if you had a metaverse, decentralized metaverse, and you were able to go into that metaverse, earn money? Who are you paying tax to?
Well, I mean, it's a complex question, because at some point a government is going to step in and start taxing that, whether we like it or not.
No, they can't. If you keep the key facet of the metaverse, which everybody missed out on, and this is the same for any elevation out of a physical realm. If the money is earned in that realm and kept in that realm and spent in that realm, despite having contractual obligations back to the real world, you're not paying tax on it. So let's say you're playing a game, right? Let's say we were playing WoW. Let's go back to something that everybody knows, World of Warcraft, right? But in World of Warcraft, you could spend your WoW coins or WoW gold on a pizza, which then got delivered to your door. would you have to pay tax on that pizza? Or would you have to pay tax on that gold that you earned to pay for the pizza?
I mean, right
You
now,
couldn't.
no, of course not, because there's no way of being able to tax it. But all the government has to do is change some kind of legislation that suggests the internet or the electricity you're using for your internet is somehow now part of that metaverse. They actually own the underlying
Infra.
features that allow you to use the metaverse, and therefore everything that happens within that realm is going to be able to be taxed.
Yeah,
So
except the
I
internet
understand
is
that. I
already
understand the
public
point that you're
infrastructure.
making, of course, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
get
yeah.
it, and I think it's a perfectly reasonable direction to go in for an argument, and it's actually a very smart argument. But I do imagine at some point there are going to be countries out there, especially the more forward-thinking ones, that are going to find a way to, well, they're going to suggest it's positively taxed, but they're going to try and find a way to tell you they're positively taxing, and they will just simply find workarounds, I imagine.
Yeah, then we have to find one ourselves. So no, I
Right.
mean my point is in decentralized systems, right? So the internet is free still for now. The internet is
Mhm.
still free and unfettered. So if something is decentralized and exists in the cloud only, there isn't any jurisdiction for it. That's why it's important to be decentralized and not on a server, because we've already discovered, even with torrent sites and so on and so forth, that the servers you're hosted on are where they will go for you. So if you are distributed and you're on, a small fraction of many different servers, then you're in a situation where you would fall outside of the realm of regulation. And even though they do have those regulations, let's face it, they still haven't stopped streaming and they still haven't stopped torrents either. But that's
Right.
another ethical and philosophical
It's,
argument,
it's
right?
interesting you bring that up, because one of the questions I was going to have is on the tax implications, because I've heard you speak on saying that you're going to be proud when you're able to. You mentioned your mum, you always use her as a use case to be able to
Yeah,
bring someone into Web3 without them actually knowing they're interacting with Web3.
yeah,
And I like the concept in principle, but also we know that especially in somewhere like the UK, when you start transferring from token to token, if you've made any kind of appreciation on it, theoretically it's subject to tax. Now, they can't track wallets at the moment. So what happens to someone who might want to use their US dollar or Great British pound or whatever it might be as a currency to buy something? It automatically gets filtered through to the FLMC token. They are unaware it's happened, and
yeah.
potentially they've made a gain somewhere that they don't realize has been made, and they are subject to tax,
No, that's
or
exactly
those
the same
multiple
as,
layers of tax.
because the way it works is exactly the same as you would do it on an exchange, right? So say for example you had just Spanish lira, Spanish, what is it? Euros, right? Let's say you had
Euros, yeah.
euros, right? And yet you were in the UK and you wanted to buy something that was in pounds. If you pay in euros and get pounds, you don't pay tax on that event. It's just an exchange. It's a currency exchange, FX transaction. It's not a trade. A trade has to be specifically for the purpose of the game. You can't get charged tax on, oh wow, I got £1, 1 penny back because I cashed in a euro. They don't tax you on that.
No, I mean, of course not on such small amounts, but when we're talking about far larger amounts, and of course you guys are going to be offering some very premium assets that people can buy. It was just a question I thought was interesting, because it's something I
Yeah,
guess somewhere down the line to start thinking about, right? If
sure,
we
sure.
move
I
on a
mean, we
little
have
bit,
legal.
sorry, go on.
We do have a one of the top legal firms of Singapore that does give us their opinions on these particular matters, and obviously the
Mm.
tax environment does change in jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and we're on top of all of that, right? But right now, the currency exchange, in terms of just even if you were buying something in multi-currency on any kind of e-commerce platform, there is no difference to doing it that way or doing it with us, because the conversion happens in the background. You are not actively trading that, so it's not a taxable
Mm.
action.
Okay. I hear a lot of positives in what you guys are trying to achieve, and I like the idea of putting data onto an NFT. And actually, at the heart and the core of what you're wanting to do is, make data transfer, especially with high value assets, more secure by putting them onto the blockchain, putting them in an immutable NFT, so that nobody can get at it. So it's not sitting behind mountains of paperwork, as the example you gave with the horses, for example. And even in real estate, it's mountains of paperwork you've got to get through. I think
Mm-mm.
that's great, and I think that as a selling point is great. But one of the things, when I'm looking at your DApp, for example, and when I'm listening to all of the information that's thrown at me, and you've already said it will take a couple of go throughs for people to really wrap their head around it.
Yeah,
The DApp, I struggled with it. I found it a little underwhelming in terms of what I'm hearing from you that you want to achieve. Because on the one
yeah.
hand, I hear these great ideas. On the other hand, I look at the DApp and I think, oh, this doesn't illustrate to me what it is that you guys want to achieve. And then on top of that, I can't click on any of the links. Is that something you're actively working on now? Because that to me is massive for this space. And, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is just the version 1 proof of concept, which also helps us, by the way, with the corporate sales. So there are NFT aggregations to go into there. There's all that real estate to be uploaded onto there. As you see the marketplace gets fleshed out, it will make more sense. In addition, the sliders at the front are meant to carry and will be carrying more and more educational materials, where we will have YouTubers that are around about 30 seconds to a minute just explaining all of those features. There is a massive amount of education that needs to go on in terms of getting people up to speed with this in easy, digestible, bite-sized content. And rest assured, that is part of the program for the next 6 months. That's kind of why we're doing the token launch and then also doing the staking rewards right now. This is early adopter time right now. Now, there will be venture projects for people to invest in for the Champagne Charlie and the Fantasy Dollars, and there will be real estate, and there will be NFTs for people, traditional JPEG NFTs for people to trade in if they wish. The DEX is not going to be launched straight away. We rejigged that. There is a profit sharing element that is about to be launched, and we have updates every 2 to 4 weeks for the next 6 months to even a year, already mapped out, already coded some of it, right? But there's a lag between completing the code and then testing the code, pen testing it all, seeing what the implications are, and then upgrading the actual visible site. So yeah, we're just focused on getting this launch out right now. And you mentioned we bootstrap. We're a very lean team. I think we're a total of nine employees at the moment. It's not a lot of people, and it's an awful lot of work. And then obviously we have outsourced 300 coders that we also work with.
Right, understood. So talk to me about the token. If people want to get involved, where do they get involved? How do they get involved? And what are the benefits of getting involved now?
Okay, so there are a couple of launch pads running the project, which is helping. See, right now we're in that sort of community growth phase, right? So that's with the initial pre-token launch. So FLMC is the token. It's launching on MEXC, which is a no KYC exchange, actually. Tier 2. It is coming on Monday the 11th. And I can't give you the time in Universal Time, I'm afraid. I think it's...
Hello?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Is it my audio or is it Sean's audio? Can somebody in the community chat tell me? Because I can't hear anything.
I can hear you.
Can anybody hear Sean?
Okay, so you can still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Now I can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so 11th of September is MEXC for the token launch. It's existing on a few launch pads right now, Spores, Kingdom, Neuro, something. But there's also a pre-sale site on our platform. It is a little bit laggy because it's been hit by a few things, and the total value on there has not been updated. There is a flaw in the DApp. Having said that, it's at 135, and the launch is at 180. So there is actually potentially some gains to be made there. But there are the only numbers we can talk about publicly. The way I would see it is this: we have a 20 million circulating supply, okay? And our token is deflationary. It's very important to understand. Most deflationary tokens you hear about have, billions supply. The reason why our token is deflationary is because if you were to purchase a Fleamint membership, which is not launched yet, if you buy the membership, which is a monthly sub, the FLMC that you spend on that membership is burned, taken out of circulation, put in a burn wallet, does not exist ever again, cannot be accessed. This is going to make the token deflationary and add buying pressure. But what does membership give people? Depending on the tier, it will give you a share of a profit reward pool. So the CEO, James, who's done this kind of thing before, is going to take a portion of all the transaction fees that are on the marketplace or on the DEX and funnel them into a reward pool, which will then become profit sharing for the people who are members, which I think is a pretty cool way to gain engaged and evangelizing kind of users, right?
Right. Sure. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Are there going to be any airdrops? I see somebody that's asking if there's going to be airdrops for pre-salers.
No, the airdrops have already been set up. It depends what he's meaning here. So ask him if there would be airdrop for the pre-saler. Do you mean the people who already bought at the 70-cent round or the 90-cent round or the previous 135 section? Because if he means that, then yes, they all get airdropped just before the launch. But there's also 888% staking that soaks up that sell pressure. So the actual total circulating supply, I believe, at launch will be around about potentially liquid supply is 1.2 million. But because we believe we will lock up at least half of that, you're probably looking at about maybe even 600,000 total circulating supply. Now, rule of thumb, even if it was 1.2 million and you got $600 million worth of assets to purchase, a very rule of thumb way to calculate a fair value would be to look at the total asset value and divide it by the number of circulating tokens. And then that gives you an idea of what the target price might be. We're not making any promises. We do not do financial advice, all the usual disclaimers, right? But the picture looks pretty solid from assets over supply to me.
Okay. Someone would like to know if the DEX isn't being released on launch, if they wanted to sell the tokens, not that they would want to sell per se, but if they did want to sell the tokens, how are they going to be able to do that?
So he would transfer to the CEX. That's right. Yes. So you guys would transfer to MXC if you wanted to sell at that point or trade the token. But with the staking options lined up, I think you're probably going to want to stake.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to link your Discord because you did mention you're in the community building phase at the moment, and one of the prerequisites for being eligible for our giveaway is that they are in your Discord. So I'm just going to post that while I ask a few more questions, and then I will let you get some more rest, I imagine, or you're going to be working all the way through and grinding hard.
I'm going to drop my kids off at school in an hour and a half, so you have me for a max of an hour and a half.
Okay, great. There's, like I've already said, and there's a lot of exciting stuff here, and I like the approach that you're taking with the NFTs. Of course, there's going to be difficulties with that, and one of the things that we do here is we might dive a little bit deeper into the difficult sides, because I think the more transparent a project and the project leads can be, the better it is for the investors to understand what they're putting their money into, and then the more likely they are to invest if they like what they hear. So in terms of this, there's going to be obviously some very exciting things, but where might there be a significant point of failure, and what is the Fleamint team actively doing to mitigate against that?
Right. So we do have a SWOT analysis, but we don't tend to talk about it in public.
Okay.
So I mean, I understand the poignant question, right? But the thing is, one thing we don't want is to highlight certain things to competitors, right? And competitors is one of the major points of failure. I mean, literally, Twitter or rather X, let's say, going into crypto payments soon. We know that they have an inclination towards this, but they're heavy on the social creation side, which is a relief, honestly. We partnered with Amazon under an NDA and then saw them basically copy a lot of our ideas, which was pretty disheartening. So we ended up focusing on Amazon Chain Query. That's why it's taken us 14 months to get to the point where we're actually finally launching, right? From conception to actual creation. And you asked the money question on how we bootstrapped. So the first few 100,000 was raised from friends, family, and general random people. And to the point where we were calling people up and saying, "Hey, would you like to invest in a project? We've got some NFTs to sell you. We'll airdrop you tokens." And we did it. We raised nearly $1 million that way, and then we raised over $500,000 in revenue from the Web2 to 3 consultancy. And that was all of the money until we finally got some institutional money coming in. And that institutional money is not like a parachute of here, have millions of dollars. It's a perform in a certain way, and then we give you X amount. And it's 10 million over 3 years, or potentially up to 10 years, but let's say 10 million over 3 years. So that brings us to actually a 12 million total raise.
Right. Okay, great. Education is going to be huge in this space. And you've kind of mentioned it a little bit. When do you start rolling out some of the educational pieces so that people can really get into the bite-sized chunks of what it is that you want to achieve? Because like I said, there's so much going on that your DApp, as it stands, doesn't fully display what it is that you're trying to achieve. And when I hear you speak, and I'm reading between the lines, I've already said a couple of times, it is very much NFTs are you're very much wanting to use NFTs for what they were originally designed for and not what they were repurposed for in order to make a bit of money.
Yeah.
Last year, couple of years ago. So yeah, when does that start to roll out to really get people that information, which is what I think they can get behind?
So it's all about the numbers of users that we have and how we're actually approaching them. So the people who are in our Discord have actually had quite a lot of this education in terms of AMAs and conversation, where we recruit them to become evangelists to help other people within the community to learn more about what we do. The other test kind of demographic are those very early investors at the beginning, the friends, family, and wider reach, of which most of them had no clue what an NFT was. Most of them have never touched crypto before. But they are the first batch of my moms, and they have already been sent testers of our video educational material. So there is material that's already been raised, and they've been sent how to create a wallet, and they've been sent how to interact with the platform, and it's refining that into the right kind of bite size. I'm not the best person to do it because I will talk forever, okay? And people don't want to listen to that kind of stuff, right? People want a short, sharp, punchy. This is this. This is that. Let's go, and that's in process, let's say. You will see those things probably popping up more around the October, November time. And during that phase, we've got hopefully a decent amount of users that have come in from the launch and the launch pads and from this community. And this community will also be a part of that early adoption side. And then you're staking and getting involved in the Champagne Charlie and the Fantasy Dollars. And as each project comes out, there's going to be different educational materials for that project because there isn't a one size fits all. Do you see what I mean? So, I mean, look, I understand that looking at the site with nothing on it is a bit like what's going on. It doesn't make sense. As the projects get populated, they will come with their own educational elements. And as items are available on the marketplace, they'll be visible there. Once people start signing up into the site, which is a very important thing I recommend people do, there might well be a whitelist for people to get into the 888% APY staking pool. Once you are starting to get into the platform and signed up, you're then able to receive notifications, be part of the social, be part of the educational group, etc., etc., etc. Those things will allow those community people to, one, use the platform, give us feedback, improve the platform. Two, receive educational material, watch it, read it, then feedback on it, and then improve it. So this is very much a collaboration of the user and us. We can't say this is the perfect UI because people haven't battle tested it yet. We've had consultants galore come in. Believe me, we've had rejigs, rebuilds. We built a first version of this NFT marketplace. Actually, we built it in 3 months originally on AVAX.
Nice.
We've pivoted along the construction process. The end will be actually multi-chain. This is on BSC right now. We already have a Solana version of the marketplace built. We already have the AVAX version of the marketplace built. We will integrate all of those things probably around about December. And then you'll have a bridge via that DEX that will allow people to go multi-chain completely. I mean, there is a lot to it, but you can't really sort of just do a one-size-fits-all educational program because it's going to evolve with people. That's, I suppose, the short answer. And the educational materials will improve, as will the UI over time. Trust me, when it's got stuff in it, it looks much better, but we decided it would look much better with real things in it rather than placeholders. So that's why you look at it and it's like a skeletal kind of framework to it right now.
Sure. Understood. There's a question here about the tokens allocation. They're going to be vested. If yes, can you break it down in terms of times, I guess this person means?
So there are different types of tokens vested at different periods. Most of the pre-sale tokens right now in the 135 round are on a 90-day vest. The tokens in the launch pads are on a day one vest. So you can also buy from Spores or Kingdom Starter, but they're obviously slightly more expensive. That's why they do vest immediately. There will be allocations for a staking program for the 90-day vesting people as well, but it won't be vesting for as long a period. So, for example, right now, at launch, people will be staking and vesting for 150 days. The intention for the 90-day people is to give them the 60 days remaining of that staking period.
Understood.
So
And
the full
minimum
unlock will
contribution is
occur-
$10, right?
Yeah, it's nothing. $10. Yeah.
Is there a maximum?
No. Well,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, good luck trying to do more than $1 million. I don't think you'll be able to do it.
Right. Well, I don't know if somebody came in with $1.5 million. I'm sure you'd have a conversation with them at some stage, right?
We'd probably want to do that over the counter, and we don't want
Right.
it to impact on our things. You see, we care about scaffolding the token value long term, and this is one of the things that James has got a huge amount of experience in his previous companies. The key facet is utility, but you've also got to manage the token supply, right? So we don't want massive inflation. That's why it's only 20 million total supply. We don't want people vesting and dumping on people. This is not we're not about a pump and dump of even early investors. We don't want them to be dumping on people. We want stable growth, right? And the reason why we hold back some of our assets to put onto the platform is because they have to grow in line with the token value growth. If you would just put like $1 billion worth of assets straight on the platform, and then token price fluctuated hugely, you're then really causing a massive issue for that token to sustain itself long term. However, because every transaction does occur in FLMC, we do have constant buying pressure. It's buy and sell pressure, sure, but it's like volume, and that volume does generally bring the price up. Then when you add in the deflationary elements, you've got a solid upward projectile.
Right.
Trajectory, not projectile. So look, if I was a customer, for example, and I looked at this project and I had some decent money and I could park like 20 grand, 30 grand, something like that, and put it in a staking contract and get like, a good return over time. What I would be doing is looking at real estate property in the future and going, well, do you know what? Could I buy and bear in mind as well, Southeast Asia prices are very different from Europe, right? So you could buy yourself a 3-bedroom villa with a pool and a good return on investment in terms of rental yields and somewhere you can go live in the holidays, right? And you could probably buy something like that for about £86,000, which is insane if you think about the cost of housing in the UK, right?
Right.
So if you could buy something like that for £86,000 and you don't have £86,000, but you had 10 or 20 and you had an ability to see a path to save or stake, get rewards, and participate in a passive income platform where you have an option to try and build £86,000. And then when you've built that £86,000, instead of taking the money off and paying taxes and all that kind of stuff, you just immediately turned it into a property. Then that would be a pathway that I would be very interested in looking at.
And if you can facilitate that, more the better. Yes, I can certainly see why you would want to go down that road. It's a great selling point if you're able to facilitate it. I'm going to ask you in a minute what you're most excited about. Before I do, one of the things that I learned when I was running my business is I overextended my reach a little bit with certain things that I was trying to bring into the business as by way of different revenues. I overestimated how much people would want from my business. And I learned a bit of a harsh lesson at the time from it. If you guys are in a position where you say to yourselves, like, we might be overextending ourselves, or this particular aspect of what we're trying to do is really outperforming another aspect, how willing is the team to say, right, for the moment, let's do away with this particular portion of what we wanted to achieve. We'll shelve that for now. We're going to pivot a little bit and move in the direction that is really successful. Now, while it might not be all the bells and whistles that we were promising at the times we were having these kind of conversations like we are now, it is something that we know we can really get behind, drive forward very hard, and then revisit what that other aspect was. Are you guys willing to do that?
Yeah, exactly what we've done. So I alluded to this earlier when I said we've had lots of different advisors and so on and so forth. The entire project is focused around venture right now. So realistically, at launch, the DEX will not be in place. The social elements will not be in place. The marketplace is only going to have the first batch of NFT aggregation after about a month. Those real estate products that we've got lined up to be on the platform will filter in, not all at once. And the venture stuff that we're launching, those 2 projects, that's the main focus. Now, the other ancillary elements kind of are there anyway. Like you've got your wallet capability. That's part of the sign up process. Is a really simple part. The integration and the pipes, let's say, the connections for everything is already built. The UI UX is already built for those elements, but they're grayed out at this particular point. What we want to do is bootstrap the community growth as well as bootstrap the cost of doing stuff. So whilst we built quite a lot of it and all iterations, the real takeoff point will come probably December when we launch the mobile version of the app. Because right now you're probably used to Web3 projects not working very well on mobile phones. So this has been built from the moment of creation of this web version we've already been working on the mobile version, and it is mobile native.
Okay, great, good to know. Excitement. What are you most excited about? There must be something on a personal level with this particular project that you are most excited about seeing, implementing, or kind of going through. What is that?
Sure. Honestly, it's really, really geeky, but it is seeing my mum and mass adoption from this project. And, whether it's hard to say, right? Because like I'm a bit of an idealist, okay? I am ex-TradFi. I do hate banking. I don't want to see those greedy scumbags making money out of us anymore. And I was one of them. And at that time, I didn't think about the ramifications of my actions, right? I was involved in the subprime industry. I made a lot of money and didn't care about the fact that it was coming from stuff that actually saw people lose out, right? Because when people were borrowing money for property and then paying 20% for their mortgage interest payments, which incidentally, that's what they were paying back in 2001. Subprime people were paying up to 20%, right? And then you cause this like kind of greed loop of people remortgaging to get out of the fixed rate that they were in so that they can get into another fixed rate because the reversionary rate is so impossible to repay. Really, all they were doing is just kicking the can down the road while the banks just made more and more and more and more money. And the bailout of the banks was so against the moral situation. They all had the security of the property. They didn't need a bailout. They should have just taken the property back and then cleared all the debt and then started from that. But instead, they changed the rules. They changed the rules on the public, and it was completely immoral. I want to see, and I am so excited about changing that so that the power is in the public's hand. And so the public and the borrowing people, or let's say the people raising money, they have that relationship directly without the middleman. And yeah, sure, we are a little bit of a middleman, but we're not custodying anything. We're not making anything other than verifying the parties that come into the ecosystem. And then that's it. It's up to them. We verify they've got money. We verify that the public is the public. Those two people are allowed to transact. There's no dodgy people. There's no scammers. There's no sanctioned individuals. Once we've done all of that, then our bit's ended. And that's why we don't make as much of the banks. We make a much, much smaller slither. However, it's fairer for all, and I really want to be part of that. I want to be known. This sounds so terrible, right? But I want respect. God damn it! I want people to know that I'm excited to know that my kids will say, "Hey, Dad, you made your money fairly and honestly." I want that. I really, really want people to feel that I've done something good for the world. Sorry.
Great. No, you don't have to apologize. Why are you apologizing?
Because I'm English.
Fair enough. Okay. In which case, I'm sorry. No, that's a fair enough answer. And, I like the response being that you are hoping to see the first person who perhaps has no plans to ever get into Web3 come through you guys because it makes sense for them. And when that day happens, it means you've achieved at least part of what you guys are setting out to do. Sean, I'm aware I've had you for almost an hour and a half now, so it's been a great chat. Thank you. And I hope we can bring you in at some point near the end of the year to see how you guys are progressing and see, what's ready to be launched.
Yeah, thank you. And just say thank you to everybody who came in and listened to me drone on for an hour and a half as well. I really appreciate you guys giving us your time, your ear space, your head space. And yeah, please join our community. Please visit the pre-sale. Please have a look at the Discord. We appreciate you guys because we are building it for you, but we kind of need you too.
Well said. All right. Well, Sean, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I hope we can do this again. Have a very good morning. Look after your kids, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Take care.